Starstreak Missile is the go-to missile for defence within the British military, being mostly forgotten since its introduction as the UK government was smart enough not to get into a war with other countries that had an air force. But now it's gotten a new lease on life as it's been sent onto the battlefields during the war in Ukraine. Starstreak is the fourth in a continuous line of domestically produced MANPAD missiles. That's man-portable air defence for anyone wondering. The saga of missile defence in the UK would begin in the 1960s with a system called blowpipe. Hated by everyone that ever had to use it, its poor performance would breed a level of scepticism within the establishment of the British military for decades to come. Half of the missiles used during the Falklands conflict would suffer some form of malfunction. At the same time, the SAS were using the American-designed Stinger. They did only have about 10, but they were easy to use and worked when fired. This early failure would force the UK back to the drawing board and swapped out the manual guidance from blowpipe for a sackless system. This redesign led to the creation of a weapon confusingly called Javelin. The system was much better received as it was both easier to use and train on, allowing it to be issued to those specialised anti-air units and at a company level for use by ordinary soldiers. Javelin would see a series of upgrades with the addition of an IFF system and laser guidance. This upgrade package would enter British service as the Starburst Missile. With all of these upgrades, you would imagine that the British government would be happy. The Cold War was coming to an end, and the prospect of fighting hordes of Russian Hinds was rapidly becoming a distant memory. But the High Command resentment of the blowpipe missile continued. They wanted something new, and now that the soldiers who had to suffer for using blowpipe were in more senior ranks, they got their way. GSR 3979 would be issued with two main competitors. What would become Starstreak, right now it's called the LML, would face off against a missile called Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt was madness. It was a kinetic kill missile travelling at about Mach 4 developed by BAE Systems. In comparison, Starstreak was relatively conventional, with it winning the contract. It would have a somewhat difficult road to adoption, however. Development and testing would drag on through the 80s and into the early 90s, but it would be finally adopted in 1997. It lacked an IFF system, so Thales, the system's manufacturer, was contracted to develop one in the year 2000, and with the addition of the IFF receiver, its name would once again change from LML to Starstreak. In 2007, Starstreak 2 would be developed, increasing the range to over 7 kilometers, although an accurate figure has never been released. Then, in an effort to save money, Starstreak would undergo some redesigns in 2017, as the system was re-rolled from a MANPADS system into an all-round anti-air missile for use by ground vehicles, smaller boats and helicopters. There was some speculation that the US were looking to purchase Starstreak as a replacement to Stinger or to serve alongside it, as some testing was done with them, but nothing ever seemed to come from this, other than confirmation that Starstreaks could be fired from the ANTWQ-1 Avengers, with some modifications. With the missile tube coming in at 14 kilograms, it's relatively light, this being about 50% heavier than Stinger. They both have similar ranges of over 7 kilometers, but Starstreak does have a different warhead and may have a longer range for accounting for the weight. With a length of 1.4 meters and a diameter of 13 centimeters, it's both comparable to other systems, but it can be quite cumbersome to move around. This has always been a limitation of MANPAD missiles though, so it's nothing new. None of this includes the sight though, which is commonly stated to weigh around 14 kilos as well, although there's no concrete data on this. All of this comes to a per unit cost of around £100,000, so it can be relatively cost effective, depending on what you're shooting at of course. Its warhead, or should I say warheads, are the thing that gets a little bit weird. Split into 3, each one of the tungsten darts weighs around 1 kilo, with half of that being a PBX explosive filler. Each of these darts is independently fused with delayed impact fusets. The way the 3 work together to take down a target is quite interesting. After the main rocket motor burns out, the darts are released and fly towards the target in a group of about 1.5 meters in diameter. Each of the darts has its own laser seeker that uses 2 lasers to map the target's location and guide the darts towards the target. This introduces a lot of redundancy as there's no longer a single point of failure. It also makes them harder to intercept. The laser guidance makes flares and radar jamming useless, and as the darts don't have rocket motors and have a relatively small cross-section, this means that IR and radar guided missiles won't be able to detect them. This means that Starstreak can defeat most of the common defense mechanisms, along with any hard kill systems that may be developed in the future. To see how effective they are is somewhat difficult. The UK has never actually used them operationally. They were deployed to Iraq but never used owing to the fact the Iraqi Air Force never even took off. In fact, if it hadn't been for the Russia-Ukraine war, Starstreak would have seen more Olympic Games than combat tools. But it would finally see service when it would first be sent covertly, then formally to Ukraine. Like most of the other British supplied equipment, it's difficult to tell how good it's been for the same reason, a limited supply. The shortcomings with the laser seeker, mostly that you have to retain line of sight, were not as bad as expected but definitely still there. The other problem is they aren't particularly good against drones. This is a problem most of the NATO MANPADS and air defense systems in Ukraine are running into, so it's certainly not unique to Starstreak, but it's worth keeping in mind. The key standout is they have an incredibly high success rate. The 3 independent warheads basically guarantee a successful strike, meaning they can be fired off one by one, unlike other systems where the salvo of missiles need to be rippled off in order to confirm the target will be destroyed, saving Ukraine money in the long run and reducing the chances operators will be discovered in the battlefield. Starstreak is one of those rare examples in the modern military. It is a system where the soldiers on the ground were given a terrible piece of kit to begin with, but the moment they got into a position to make changes they did, leaving the UK with one of the more dependable systems the world has to offer.